Welcome back. You're watching The Fix with me, Karima Brown. I'm in conversation with the Executive Director of the Women's Legal Centre as well as the manager of SWEAT. Nosipho, let me start with you. Sehaam was speaking about the importance of rolling out domestic safety plans and that it's been sitting in the justice system, and that's for women in their homes. What, as an organization, is SWEAT calling for that you need within the architecture of the criminal justice system to give sex workers greater protection? Because if they are involved already in activity which is outlawed, which is criminalized, where they are the ones that are arrested and the person procuring the sex isn't arrested, what is it that we need to make sex workers more safe and to also protect them from gender-based violence?
So the most highest law that we've been asking to be changed is the criminalization of sex work, and we're calling for decriminalization of sex work because we know that it's the only globally proven law that can actually give sex workers protection, destigmatize sex work, but also give them access to labor laws, right? And we fully understand that if sex workers are not in isolated society, a part of society, they form part of the larger group of vulnerable women in South Africa. And just like Sehaam is calling for the Domestic Violence Services Act to be enacted, we're also calling for that. We want the National Strategic Plan on GBV to be fast-tracked. We're also calling for the Hate Crimes Bill because sex workers do form part of the community of LGBTI as well, and gender non-conforming people. And with the lockdown, we saw a lot of people going into their homes where they face not just only discrimination and violence because they are sex workers, but also because they identify as queer or gender non-conforming or lesbian or trans. So we're calling for those laws to be fast-tracked, to be implemented in South Africa. But with, like I said, the first priority that we're calling for is the decriminalization of sex work. As Sehaam was talking about the inequalities that are suddenly coming out. With the lockdown, we saw a lot of disempowerment for women in the sex work industry, trans women, as they went home without salaries. So with decriminalization, it would actually mean that at this time they could have had access to even the most basic of the services that the country was offering, which was the unemployment fund, which is UIF, right? And sex workers went home without this, which meant that they were facing not just the violence from their partners or from society, but they were also facing economic violence.
Sehaam, on the question of sex workers, when one talks about decriminalization in this part of our economy, you often come up against ridicule, you often come up against a society that is quite prude, that hides behind religion and all kinds of customary issues, as if people do not have sex or don't pay for sex, or as if a lot of sex in South Africa is not actually transactional. And the lived realities of so many people in South Africa shows the contrary. What do we need our legal fraternity to do to begin to fast-track this legislation to give sex workers the kind of protections that they need, given how very far down they are on the rung in terms of accessing rights in our Constitution?
Karima, you are so correct. I mean, the decriminalization of sex work has primarily been held by organizations like SWEAT, like Sisonke, Asajiki, the public, and also within the broader public interest legal sector. But it is so critical and so important that the organized legal profession also get on board in relation to that, because we do see that many sex workers that do go through the court system, and Nosipho will most probably say that we have seen that many of these cases don't actually get to finality. It gets withdrawn from the court, it gets removed from the court roll. So what does that mean? It means that the sex workers are just removed from the space where they work, and they are placed within the criminal justice system, which is already overburdened. And what we have seen is that that it is so important that the organized legal profession actually engage the state to be able to ensure that there is decriminalization of sex work, and submissions have to be made when they speak about, for example, around issues of gender-based violence. Sex work in particularly is just a matter because it's so deep rooted in stereotypical and religious and cultural beliefs. Nobody really within the profession wants to deal with that. But I think the time is here to be able to ensure that we all move towards the decriminalization of sex work, because sex work is work. But Karima, you asked me such an important question on what needs to be done immediately. What we have seen during the lockdown is that the courts need to ensure that there's technology in the or at least that technology is being used in the administration of justice. Whilst we have seen that there has been movement rights that have been curtailed and have been limited, we need to be able to see how can we ensure that access to justice moves into the fourth revolution. How do we ensure that there is digitization of our courts, virtual hearings, online hearings? How do we ensure that there is empowerment where women don't have to navigate through, for example, from their homes, etc., but they can stay within the confines of safe spaces, within the communities, through your advice officers, through your NGOs, through your shelters, etc., to be able to ensure that there can be a virtual, for example, legal service. And this is the time for us to be able to be creative. This is the time to be able to ensure how can we enhance other rights in our constitution through pushing it into the fourth revolution and through digitization. I cannot overemphasize the importance of data and the importance of ensuring that women have access through this particular
okay,
platform.
Sehaam, hold your thought. I want to bring Nosipho back into the conversation. Nosipho, in the struggle to get the decriminalization of sex work, on the go, what has been the reaction from government, from religious institutions? What has been the battle? Because this is an ongoing battle. I remember the last MEC who seriously considered decriminalizing sex work was Jessie Duarte, the current Deputy Secretary General of the ANC, when she was still the MEC for Safety and Security in Gauteng, a few decades earlier. And she was very close, and then she had to back off because there was so much opposition from religious institutions, and it became a taboo. Has attitudes changed among politicians, among political parties and religious institutions? What is the kind of level of acceptance for the importance of such a bill to actually get past, Nosipho?
It seems that the real holdup right now would be the Department of Justice. Because even a report that was done by the South African Law Reform Commission was given to them, and it went into cabinet, and it was sent back because they were not understanding why the report itself was still asking for partial criminalization, which is non-constitutional and does not go with our the constitution that we have in South Africa, right? And this came about because within Parliament itself, many of the portfolio committees and the members of Parliament are actually pro-decriminalization of sex work, and do understand that it's for agency on women's bodies. It's also for protection from violence for sex workers. It's also for economic liberation for sex workers, and it cannot longer be held or seen in a moral lens, right? Yeah. We've also seen some other members of Parliament, like the Minister Lamula, asking for sex work to be decriminalized in South Africa. So it really seems like the real hold here is the Department of Justice, and we have no idea why they would actually have such a hold. When it comes to religious institutions, we're finding that attitudes have really dramatically changed over the past couple of years. Here in Cape Town, for instance, there has been a banner that was rolled out where the pastor of the Methodist Church had come out to talk and say that we can no longer keep on punishing sex workers and judging sex workers and discriminating upon sex workers, because Jesus is not about that, right? Of course, within the decrim movement itself, in Arela, for instance, which is a coalition of churches and pastors, have actually called out for decriminalization themselves, and have actually been including sex workers in their spaces and in their platforms. So public conceptions have really changed over the past couple of years. It's just a matter of the Department of Justice realizing that it's no longer really that taboo, and it's no longer about moral judgments, but about the agency of women, about trying to reduce violence towards sex workers, and about making sure that people are able to self-sustain.
Absolutely. Nosipho, thank you so very much. That is the program manager for SWEAT, Nosipho Vidima. And of course, also with me this morning was Sehaam Samaai, the head or executive director of the Women's Legal Centre in Cape Town, speaking there about the criminal justice system and the extent to which it empowers women to fight for themselves and to protect them from gender-based violence. While this is a topic that, of course, is not exhausted by any stretch of the imagination, we will return to it from time to time, and not only when we see the bodies of women stuffed into bags and hanging from trees. You've had your fix for this week. See you again next Sunday. Thank you so much for watching.